Welcome, everyone. I'm Brian Gregory with Aldridge. For those of you that aren't familiar with us, we provide IT outsourcing and cybersecurity services to small and medium-sized businesses. We're excited to host this webinar with Doran Mayhew. We've been partnering with Jennifer and her team. Jennifer, I think it's been at least 10 years, maybe 15 at this point in time. Doing events like this, but also as our CPA, assistance with M&A, and we certainly look to Doran as a trusted partner and look forward to a continued relationship there. We've got some exciting conversation to have today, and as we were looking and talking through potential topics for the webinar, we kept coming back to the uncertainty that companies have right now as it relates to the economy, their workforce, the landscape of their client needs, you name it. There's a lot of uncertainty that's out there. And one of the things that we wanted to talk through is how can companies prepare to be more agile if they need to make tough decisions to potentially scale back, or on the flip side, be agile to scale up quickly and be able to take advantage of an opportunity. And one of the ways that we talked about to be able to prepare is for a company to be able to identify their core value proposition and make sure their time, energy, expertise is focused on that, and then identify the items that aren't at the core and figure out how to get those functions handled without distracting from the core focus. And so for the next hour, we'll talk a little bit more about that, how to identify it, what you can do to better align there. But I know a lot of you that are joining here, you are joining to get your CPE as well, and so we want to make sure that you can take advantage of that. So to get your CPE, just make sure that you stay active, logged on, and participate in any attendance polls that happen so that you can get that credit. And then if you qualify, at the end, you'll be able to download it, or additionally, you'll receive a link within the next 24 hours to download that as well. You all have the ability to ask questions. We certainly want you to do so. So please ask those throughout the presentation. If they fit in, I'll ask them and interrupt our presenters today. If not, we'll have Q&A time at the end. So with that, Jennifer, you want to kind of give us a little bit of background on you and Doran, and then Chad will go to you next.
Yeah, perfect. I'm Jennifer Malis. I'm with Doran Mayhew. We are a CPA firm, work with privately held, for the most part, clients and owner-founder-led businesses. And we really focus on helping our clients achieve their goals in our areas of expertise. Specifically, my group, we are the business advisory group, will help clients kind of support their accounting department wherever they leave off. So, in the functions that they don't have in-house, we'll support those areas in a variety of different ways. And Chad?
Sure. Chad Hyatt, CIO with Aldridge, same group that Brian is with. We are a managed services and IT outsourcing provider, primarily in the Texas market, but also a market up in Seattle. We help our clients apply technology to what they're actually trying to accomplish within their business. And that's everything from help desk support to the person on the other end of the line if you can't log into your system, all the way up to IT strategy and figuring out what's next for your organization. How is technology going to contribute to your business goals and objectives? Which means I get to work with a lot of fun businesses doing a lot of fun things, and then making sure that technology is supporting those endeavors along the way. With that, I think what I'm going to do, and Brian, I know you already touched on the CPE tips for this, but what I'm going to do is just kind of kick us off here. And Brian started with this core concept of uncertainty on this. I want to say that uncertainty isn't a bad word. It's okay. We all operate businesses in dynamic markets. We all respond to customer needs, and we're all looking for opportunities. If everything was certain, I mean, it could all run on autopilot, and you could just be on vacation today and every day. Well, that might be fun. It's probably not the reality that we're operating within. We all have to choose what we prioritize and where we spend our limited time and attention, and hopefully with a mind to the biggest return on that effort, that capital, that cost. And being prepared for uncertainty means really prioritizing your efforts. So when the right opportunity or even a difficult challenge arises, you're ready to respond to it to best business benefit or least business cost. So the first thing you have to do is understand what you deliver in your organization that's unique to you. What's your core value proposition? And I'll talk more about that in a moment. Once you know what's unique to you, You know where your prioritized efforts need to go. That then lets you evaluate your business's functions, and if those functions require more of your focus or less of your focus, you're making conscientious choices. Where will you get the most return on your efforts? And doing the right things right then lets you leverage, gives you options, gives you attention to spend on that next opportunity or overcoming that next challenge. That's agility. So let's touch back on that first thing. What's your core value proposition? And while there are many ways to think through it and brainstorm and narrow it down and make it true to what you do, here's a great question to start with. What would your billboard say? What do your customers get from you that's different from what they'd get from anyone else? Do you do it better? How would customers know it? How would they feel it? And many of you have probably gone through this exercise in your own organizations, and many of you have probably gone through it multiple times as your businesses have evolved and matured. And one of the things that makes this question valuable in our present conversation about back office strategies is it can quickly weed out the things that have to get done, but that are not part of your core value proposition. Those are things that are taking your attention, but you're not really getting a strong return on them. For example, would anyone in the audience put, we pay our bills on time on their billboard? We reconcile our bank activity every month. Is that a billboard statement? And we do our month-end close and reporting accurately. We make sure each employee we hire has a computer to do their work on. We ensure each of our employees has to log on to our information systems, and we run antivirus software on our computers. None of those are really billboard statements, but they're all things that you're dealing with because they have to get done in order to be able to conduct business. Now, are those important? Yeah. Are they core to the value proposition you offer? Yeah, probably not. Now, if you haven't already, however you like to take notes, pull up or jot down your own business's core value proposition. That note's for you and your reference to glance at as Jennifer and I walk through some examples on how to think through your back office functions to help you prioritize your focus. And I'll hand it back over to Jennifer at this point.
Thanks, Chad. So when we talk about your core value proposition and then how we use that to optimize our business, we're really thinking about where do we spend our time, energy, uniqueness, and we'll get there in a second on an exercise to think through that. But, how do we either outsource, leverage technology, push things down to a lower level resource to make the non-core parts of the business very scalable and achievable? An example was I had a conversation with a client yesterday, and she happened to be talking about the business she used to work at. And she was saying like their biggest barrier to growth was hiring people, and she was actually an HR person. And so you look at, oh, well, then that means if we don't have to hire people to do things to grow, that might make that business better. And she even talked about how they were going into different areas where it was easier to hire people than where they started. She had worked at a company that was trying to hire nurses, which were obviously very hard to find. So now they were looking at other areas of home health that weren't nursing, as an example. But the key here on the optimization is to really do and control what you do best, and then kind of leave the rest to the side. And not that you don't have to do it, because you still have to pay your bills, to use Chad's example, or get your employees a computer. But control what you do best, and then kind of leave the rest to get done. And this can be especially important in a period of high rapid growth or a recession, because it's tends to be hard to scale up these back office functions quickly in a period of high growth. It's also very hard to scale them back down in a period of recession when you have specialized people doing different things. And so, what we saw in like 2008, 2009, 2014, when oil prices dropped, and then, even during COVID, was those clients that kind of focused on these core areas and spent their time on it, that the things they did to improve their business really stuck through then when they grew up again. And so it tends, these times of transition tend to create opportunities. And we're going to go through an exercise to think through this. So when we evaluate our business functions, and we did an example here of some back office functions. Your list may be different than this, and I would suggest tailoring it to you, but this is general. First is to kind of focus on, do these areas support our core value proposition? If they do, we should keep it, theoretically, we should keep it in-house and invest to do it better. And if they don't, then we should look at how do we spend less time thinking about and doing these things than what we spend today. And one area to do that is leverage another company's investment in their core value proposition, which may be some of these things. Or another way you can do it is automating some of these functions. And if we kind of look at these examples, so an operations example, I work with a lot of manufacturing clients, right? And they're always, generally they want to control every product that's put into their end product, right? But they realize I can't build every piece of this and I can't build it cost effectively. If it's something that's really core to the product and core to the value they give a customer, they may go figure out how to build it, open another plant, buy a business that builds it so they can customize it to them. If it's not, they should subcontract that part of it out. That's why there's all kinds of subcontractors in manufacturing that build component parts to end up in a end product. If we think about it, in terms of sales and marketing, right? Like most companies have some sales and marketing people, but they may not have like graphic design in-house because that's not an area that you want to hire a full-time specialist for. You may want to, and it's probably not your core value proposition either, but it's an area you need. Accounting's got a ton of examples and we'll drill into some of those, but as we go through the presentation. And then the second part of this, right, is it something that unique to you? So does it need to be done in a special way to your business? So if we go back to kind of some of the previous examples I talked about, operations, when clients tend to, like on the manufacturing side, when I want to build a component part of my product, it's because I want it very unique and specific to me, and I have a hard time getting it anywhere else. I think with supply chain issues a year ago, everyone wanted to build every part of their product, but you still couldn't get the raw materials to do it. So, but it's got to be something that kind of supports both areas to really say, yes, I have to focus on that and then not the other areas. Another example in accounting might be where bill pay is something that, it's not your core value proposition, probably not unique to you. Most bill paying processes are pretty similar. Invoicing to customers may be unique because you're communicating things to your customers on what you did and how you did it and why it costs that. Another example of something that maybe doesn't hit either of these buttons, right? That's a reduced focus area was we worked with a client where the business owner was doing weekly payroll herself in the system and not outsourcing it and spending 4 hours a week doing that. And that 4 hours could be freed up doing a lot of other more value-added things to that business that were more important. Not that getting people paid is not important, it's just not 4 hours of time important if you can leverage that. Other considerations that come into this besides the core proposition and uniqueness are they recurring tasks? Are they non-recurring tasks? What level of knowledge is required for the underlying tasks? And is that a full-time need for us or not a full-time need? And so we get into what are your options then when you look at this?
So I'll talk through some of the options on this. And I'm sure a lot of you are already aware of risk management strategy or the outcomes of risk management strategy. You can accept risks, you can avoid risks, you can mitigate risks, you can transfer risks. And there's a similar approach towards optimizing business functions. At the highest end, you can build it yourself. And it's going to cost you the most to implement it. It's going to cost you the most to operate it and maintain it. You're the only one that can make improvements to it. It's only going to be an engine that's driven by your investment, but it's going to most closely align to your optimal solution. It'll best meet your requirements because you've paid, you've invested to have it built to your requirements. And that might be spinning up a full in-house team with management and production and delivery staff. It might be creating a whole new product or custom manufacturing, or even your own custom software solution if we're talking from an IT perspective. Again, that's the most expensive option, and it's not just the upfront cost, it's the maintenance and operating cost of that solution, because it's only ever going to be as good as what you've directly invested into it, and it only keeps going as long as you keep investing into it. So you've got to consider carefully on the things that you choose to go that direction on. Those are your core value proposition drivers. In the middle, you could choose to buy a framework or a platform or a service or a starter and customize it. Now, that'll still cost you some additional effort to implement it, but it won't be quite as expensive to operate because you're able to leverage what's available at scale for what it does well. And then you're paying a bit more to make it your own. And whether that's a business process or a production team or manufacturing customization or a business software application, you aren't starting from scratch. You're buying into someone else's invested effort. You're getting an economy of scale for the things that you can get to that tier, and then you're adding the little bit extra that makes it unique to you and really drives your value proposition. And lastly, you could buy a standard product or a service that's good enough and it meets the important parts of the need, and it does it at an economic price. And you might not have a lot of customization options for it. It might not do everything exactly the way that you'd like to have it done. It's good at the things it does do, and the economic price means that you've freed up your capital and your attention and your efforts for things that have higher returns. Now, we all do this every day. On my own computer, I'm using Microsoft Outlook for my email. I subscribe to the off-the-shelf Microsoft Outlook product. I did not build a custom email software client, and I haven't paid anyone to customize it, and I haven't spent a significant amount of my attention to do so. It does the core of what I need to do. It lets me manage my email, it lets me manage my schedule, and I get to collaborate and coordinate with my team, and I do it very economically, but I kind of had to meet it halfway. Does it do everything for me and make coffee in the morning? No, it doesn't, but that's okay, because I'm getting what's appropriate for what I need for that tool. So let's go back to Jennifer's table and let's fill in some of the boxes. Now, your table might look a little different in this example, and that's fine. But here's a way to think about, should I buy it off the shelf? Should I build it? Or should I buy it and should I customize it? What do you get the most return upon? And as an easy example, if it's not part of your core value proposition and it's not unique to the way you operate, that's the XX on here, try to buy it off the shelf or subscribe to an existing service that's out there. You're not going to realize a significant return on any higher level of cost. Now, the opposite end of the spectrum, if it both supports your core value proposition and it's unique to you, you're likely going to have to build that one. That's going to require a lot of investment and effort. It'll take the most effort and it'll cost the most, but you'll get the best return on your effort because you're driving value that your customers then want you to be able to present to them. It's part of your core value proposition. They're the things your customers care about. There's a middle ground here where it's one or the other, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. You're probably looking for a solution you can buy or subscribe to, leverage outside, customize a little bit. You want to customize it to make it best meet your needs, but you're building on a foundation. You're starting with something other than scratch and then making it your own. And it doesn't require that extraordinary investment as if you were starting from ground zero and building the whole thing up. As you go through this type of exercise and you quantify the costs and the benefits, you might also realize that some of the things that you already have in place that you'd previously considered, this is unique to us, this is the only way to do it, might not actually merit a unique investment of cost or effort. And they could be actually accomplished equally well with something off the shelf or otherwise generally available. It's all a question of being purposeful about where you spend your time, money, and attention. And I'll turn it back over to Jennifer. And Jennifer, could you walk us through like an accounting functions example?
Absolutely. So, whoop, we went too far, didn't we? There we go.
Yeah, we both clicked. It's all good.
I couldn't speak to that next one. So when we kind of walk through accounting examples, right? I mean, this is really the things you kind of use to scale up, scale down, think through your system. And if you kind of look at this last one, right, the accounting software tools, that directly relates really well to the slide Chad just went through where we talk about optimizing functions here, right? There's a reason that like some ridiculous percentage of closely held businesses use QuickBooks, right? It's this by standard space and doesn't do it. And then, next step's a ERP that's custom to your industry. Very few clients that size have a full build it model, and so that's kind of the concept here if you kind of apply it to accounting and software. But when we kind of walk through each section here, and what I want to do on each of these is kind of talk about how we typically see it work and how, some other factors around it. But if you look at invoicing and accounts receivable, right, that's a company specific, oftentimes part of a product and service delivery workflow. And so sometimes that happens in-house, sometimes it happens automatically. And it's something that you've maybe paid to automate or function. It's typically not something that's completely outsourced. But there's ways to make it more efficient and effective and scale up or scale down with that. Same thing with collections, right? We often see that collections are handled in-house, but usually once they hit a certain stage, then you might outsource to a lawyer or have them follow up on collections. Similar issue there, right? And none of those are your core value proposition. And actually, I'd argue most of accounting's probably not. Maybe some of your very proprietary information is. Payments and accounts payable, right? Those you can outsource and automate a lot of different ways. Especially if a client has a purchase order process on the purchasing side, well, then if everything matches, it should just sail through. It's amazing the amount of time and effort or in procedures around, a purchase that's already been approved for a set amount and a set price, and yet we still spend hours trying to get a payment out the door. And, those are areas where you can, a little time can go a long way, and it should be kind of a standardized function. And then you can also use software tools like bill.com or things like that to take approval to payment processes much faster. If we talk about, purchasing and inventory, well, sometimes that's more of a internal core function because it requires knowledge of the product and service delivery the company's doing and what we need to buy to do that and what we need to carry, what we need to have on hand or not on hand. When we get into cash and banking, that can depend, and it can depend on your bank and the level of service and how things are handled. But, an easy example of that might be cash sweeps. A lot of times companies did that manually, didn't manage cash really well. As interest rates have gone up and returns have gone up, that's something you tend to want to streamline and automate. And a lot of that's just working with your bank. If your cash flow is really tight, sometimes you need to have that in-house because you're going to manage it really tightly as far as when you pay things and when you handle things. When we get into payroll, that's one that almost rarely can I think of a client that should not outsource payroll. The key part of that you keep in-house is approving the time, right? Whoever physically supervises someone should approve the hours they work. Other than that, there's not a lot of value added in the payroll function. It just needs to happen. And so that's a key area that you can streamline and outsource. There are some businesses like construction, things like that, where they have specific timekeeping requirements, but a lot of times technology or process planning or even certain payroll services can help with those things if you do a little more investigation. Month-end close, that's, yes, you got to get monthly reports done. Yes, you need that information to run your business. So it's important, but it's often not standard. And you can typically automate parts of that or have expertise that supports that. What is more important is the outcome of the month-end close, which is reporting and statements. And that's something where that's a little more customized to the business. And then if you get someone that really gives you some real examples and can help you make decisions based on that information, that has a lot more value. And one thing I was thinking of with the automation of the month-end close, we had a client several years ago that super smart, was a tax-only client. We didn't do any accounting work for him. And the tax group came to our accounting group and said, hey, their books are kind of messed up. They told us there's some issues. And so I got on the phone and the client was like, well, I use QuickBooks and everything's automated. I have all the feeds turned on. And as we did an investigation and questions, we found out she had never done a reconciliation. And so in her mind, and she didn't understand why she would ever have to because the feeds were on. I go, but how do you know the feeds are working correctly? How do you know it didn't double transactions up or transactions are missing? You said the numbers don't make sense. That's probably why. And she was adamant that no, I have the feeds on, they work. And so checks and balances on these processes can be a very good thing. So, and we did not convince her otherwise, but that was okay. When we get into reporting and statements and analysis and budgeting, that's where I said things should probably be unique to that business, what they need to run it, what their departments are, what their divisions look like. And all of that is tied where we go all the way back to the beginning to your core value proposition and what's unique to you and how do you manage it. Compliance under like taxes and controls. Most of the time people go to a third party to do their taxes. They don't keep up to speed on all the tax rules on their own to do that in-house. And, the routine functions around taxes, like maybe sales tax, those can stay internally, but you still want to automate that process through a system. You don't want to go back through every invoice you did and figure out, did I collect that money or not? And then we talked a little bit about software and tools and how, that's a very big thing. Some best practices in that we see right now too is you definitely have your software be cloud-based. I mean, I think a lot of people learned a lot of things during COVID and remote access and how to handle those things, but it makes it easier to outsource certain functions too, because it's accessible anywhere. Not that we don't know a group that could help you figure out how to access your on-prem from anywhere, but it is generally a best practice. And then, just thinking how that kind of drills into all the above. When you say, hey, I don't want to spend extra time on this task, how do I think of an ERP that helps me automate the processes of kind of above the line? And do I get return on that investment? We had a client, this was several years ago, that had a customized workflow they did specialized engraving on things. So they had a workflow that basically when someone typed in what they wanted engraved on a web order, it would print it, which was great, right? No typos, no things like that. So then they wanted to buy an ERP to align all the way through until the product shipped, the invoice goes out the door, and collect. So they did interviews, they did a process. This was a $10 million business. They were going to spend $450,000 on an ERP just out of the gate, not maintenance. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense to me, because you guys, even the efficiencies you find in that are not going to drive the return on that investment. So they're still on QuickBooks, and they for that same reason. So on that's probably a good segue to Chad for some better IT examples than just accounting related software.
Before I jump into the IT examples, I saw from one of the audience members, there was a question on how do you identify the CVP, the core value proposition, especially if there's disagreement. And I messaged Brian and asked if Brian would step in and kind of talk through maybe how we've done that within Aldridge, or what he's seen as far as techniques to reconcile.
We agree 100% of the time. What are you talking about?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. No, I think this is one of those things where getting consensus among the leadership team can be tough, because the person in charge of finance may really want to outsource some of these functions, and someone else on the leadership team may think that it's something that's core to the business, and no, we can't let go of that. And so it's not an easy conversation, and I think it's just one of those things where whatever your executive leadership meeting cadence is and the way that you process issues, this is something where you got to really get together and make sure that you agree on what functions are going to be outsourced, what's not going to be outsourced. And I think going along with that is, how do we hold the outsourced partner accountable to deliver back to us the quality of product that we're really looking for? And so just like you would hold an internal employee accountable or a department accountable, just because you're outsourcing, you're not relinquishing all control there. And just identifying what are those success factors, what are the KPIs that outsourced provider needs to live up to. We run our business very closely to KPIs and measurements, and when we outsource something, we do the same way. I don't know, Jennifer, Chad, if you've got anything to add there.
Oh, I was going to ask Brian, do you have any sage insights on how we have navigated establishing our own core value proposition and what is in the box and what's outside the box? I think part of the question that I saw from the audience was, what if there's disagreement among the leadership team about what the core value proposition even is?
Yeah, that's something, and it's changed over time. I mean, at the core of what we do, we provide IT support and consulting to our clients. So outsourcing that core value proposition for us isn't something that we've really been interested in doing. But we understand with IT, we can't be experts in all things IT. There are a lot of applications that are out there. There's custom development that needs to happen. And so those things that are on the fringes, we've had to identify what are the things that 80% of our clients are going to buy. And if 80% of our clients are going to buy it, then yes, absolutely, we need to invest in it internally to make sure that we can deliver it. If it's a one-off project for some piece of development or something like that, then that may be something that we outsource. We bring in a third party to deliver that function to the client until we get to the point where we will deliver it to 80% of our clients. Security is one of those things where historically we've outsourced most of that, but as it's becoming more common, we've got plans to bring our SOC and SIM internally as we get that more adoption there across the client base.
Good answer. Jennifer, did you have anything to add to that?
I think you guys addressed it pretty well, actually. So.
All right, cool. You know what? I'm going to run through, much like Jennifer did accounting functions, I'm going to run through IT functions. just like accounting isn't accounting and you're done. IT isn't just one big monolithic thing labeled IT. This will probably be another good slide to capture, refer back to when you guys look at the recording. As you're thinking about what's strategic, I recognize that I come to this with a very IT technology business perspective on it. So you may not be thinking about all these different elements that actually go into managing your IT, but the reality is within all of your organizations, all these things are happening, and they could be happening accidentally. They could be happening purposefully. They could be happening haphazardly. They could be happening with a high level of maturity on it. So let me just call out a couple of examples that are in here, or a couple of things that stand out to me. Application development is one of those double check items. And I'm talking the applications which are assets. They're intellectual property of your business. They're not just the regular productivity software like Microsoft Office that you routinely subscribe to and install on every computer in your organization just to get your work done. These are the things that you've invested effort or cost to build or customize, especially those that support your core value proposition. In some businesses, this literally might mean that Microsoft Excel is not unique to you, but that set of spreadsheets that you've built for order and delivery management is. That is an application. You have invested time to create an order and delivery management system building on top of a platform like Microsoft Excel. Are you aware of where those assets are within your organization? Are there things that people are spending weeks of effort every year or months of effort to put together because they're hyper-focused, maybe even tunnel vision, on making that one thing perfect? But have you looked at the broader sphere about what's actually available that might be able to do it easier? Are you prepared to pay the ongoing maintenance cost of, wow, there's some specialized tribal knowledge to keep that application up and running, and if it breaks, there's no one to turn to because we custom built it. Similarly, you might have a modern ERP application, and you might have custom data management screens and back-end data structures and reporting and analytics and data interconnectivity built within the framework aligned to your business. That's another example of application development. And in that case, you've probably got an ERP software vendor that has built the ERP platform, and you've probably got support through them, so you're managing some of your risk. You're not having to pay for the full cost of building an ERP from scratch. And you probably have an ERP consultancy that you're working with that themselves, that's their core value proposition, is helping you leverage the most of your ERP so that you've actually got some managed cost and managed risk about, well, if we want to make further improvements for it, we don't have to figure it all out ourselves. We can outsource what's appropriate, but you're still able to bring the knowledge about what's important to your business into that conversation. So those customizations most closely align to what you need for outputs from it. Now, in each of those cases, you've decided that both the implementation and the operating costs and the maintenance costs, they're worth it for the value that drives your business. You're getting a return on investment. Some of you also might at this point be thinking of examples within your own business where you or someone within your business has spent a lot of effort to customize something. And now you're wondering, are you really getting a good return on that effort? Or are you potentially exposing yourself to risk and ongoing maintenance costs that, whoa, I didn't sign up for that? And maybe the cost has been high, or the actual revenue or the productivity gains are too low. Or maybe you're now just realizing that there's a carry cost to this that we're effectively taking on by default. And great, that's exactly what I want you to be thinking through. That if we're helping you look at what your back office functions are, and you're now able to look at it with that type of lens and say, wow, we're really taking on some risk here, or we're taking on some carry cost by doing this, perfect. Just having the conversation is the right first move. The answer might be yes, it's totally worth it, but that's fine as long as it's a cognizant answer, not a by default answer. And something else that comes up with an IT is IT strategy. Now, implicitly, strategy means ensuring that your technology is contributing to or supporting your business's core value proposition. And that doesn't mean that you have to build a complete IT strategy from scratch, though. There are resources you can leverage and that you can build upon. And it'll still take effort, and you can decide based on how much you anticipate technology contributes to your business value, what parts of your IT strategy require a no compromise custom investment, and what parts can achieve appropriate results at a shared value implementation and operating cost. Again, your table might look different than this one, and that's perfectly fine. This is all about considering and supporting the decisions that are right for your specific business. Now, one more table. IT security functions. Well, there you go. Now I've got a security subset of the IT subset of the back office business functions that we're talking about. Security gets a lot of attention today, or it should, so it often requires its own consideration. And now this table's filled out for an organization that's probably in a regulated industry of some type. Maybe they're in healthcare, maybe they're in financial services, and they have compliance requirements. And modern compliance often requires maintaining a solid information security posture. And information security postures aren't just documents, they're culture, their leadership, their training, their awareness, their controls, their reviews. So in this example, this organization would probably elect to use off-the-shelf services and subscriptions for things like network security, endpoint security, threat monitoring, security awareness training. They know they need these things. They're an important part of their risk management, but they don't have to create these things custom. They can leverage those things because they aren't unique to what that business does. But this organization would probably also choose to invest a larger amount of its cost and efforts and attention into its information security posture, including its compliance and its regulatory posture and its access management, and being prepared to respond appropriately to potential security events. Now, if this feels like a lot of detail, and you're thinking that most of these top-level business functions could be broken down into varying levels of granularity like this, well, you're right. It's not wrong. Sometimes, depending on where you prioritize your costs, or where you identify your potential risks, it makes sense to drill down this far. And that by itself is one of the cost benefit questions that you'll need to consider. But it's also one of the evaluations that you could purchase. You can subscribe to services, you can use resources online, you can bring in consulting groups that specialize in driving down to this level of detail and helping you make those informed decisions with your management team. It includes expertise. That's one of the things that you can buy. Okay. I'll be the first one. Everybody exhale. So yeah, you've probably got some to-dos. Hopefully you've got some new ideas sparked already. So why are you going through all this effort? And why are you even considering doing so? And you're doing so to try to become what I'll call agile. If you have the routine stuff, the stuff that's not unique and critical to what you deliver off your plate, then you've got room and capacity to be prepared to focus on the next opportunity or threat. And I'll hand this one back over to Jennifer, and Jennifer, I'll hit the slide here.
No, thanks.
Take it away.
Yeah. So what do we need to react strategically, right? Because quickly. And, first off, we need to know what our core value proposition is and why we're doing it. I do a lot of work with clients looking to buy companies or even sell their own, but a lot of those concepts, right, are kind of half-baked because sometimes I'll have a client, well, I'm working with one right now. He's got a supplier he can buy really cheap because they don't make a lot of money. He's about 30% of their business. He's like, I think I should do it. And I'm feeling it. And I'm like, you're maybe going to make a couple $100,000 a year. And then he starts telling me all about the guy. Oh yeah, he's based in California. Yeah, they have a union. Yeah, and I'm like, and oh yeah, I don't want to go there and really work in that business. And I don't really have anyone to send either. And I'm like, so you really want me to look at this? Why do you want me to help you see if this is a good deal? I can talk to you, and I've figured out this is not probably the best use of your time and energy, right? Because it's not his core value proposition. It's product he buys, he could buy from other suppliers. It doesn't make a ton of sense. Next part of that, right, is understanding your numbers and levers. Kind of like this example I talked about, right? Does he understand what he's going to make for the time he's going to spend on it? And thinking through that, but also understanding, what's variable in your business and what's fixed today and what makes sense. One of his ideas with it was, well, if I'm doing all his back office stuff, I'll make a bunch more money than he did. I'm like, yeah, but he's in California. Like it gets harder to do that. Like there's certain things they're going to do in-house anyway. Then you get into, if you could move his plant to your plant, now you might have something a little more exciting, right? And then we get into scalable technology and resources. So to buy that business, does he have to add extra accounting staff or IT staff or HR staff or other people in his organization even support it? And how fast can you grow? And part of that is how fast you could grow or shrink as an organization. And that's kind of where that acquisition strategy comes into play. So now if we get drill in a little more and think about this from the, concept of opportunities and threats, right? So, and here we're going to just tell you some stories and give you some examples from both Chad and I's perspective. But one idea, and I kind of realized my last example is a little bit different. I had a client that was in an industry where there was a lot of small businesses, like a lot of little tiny, one-off kind of I have a job type companies, right? I got myself, I got a couple people working for me, service business, we do a little bit of work, not unlike the IT industry, right? Where you guys are fragmented and have that, but this is not your example. And so a lot of those companies, the owners were getting older, they were shutting down. Our client looked at it and said, hey, I think I could actually make some money on these businesses. There's a fair amount of repeat work out of them. I just had this insurance settlement where I got $1 million for a roof damage claim. So he wound up using that money to leverage it to buy 15 different companies. And, in some cases they had to add people who provided the service to the team. But because he had made significant investments in an ERP system, he had us doing some outside controller and CFO level work for his company. What that did was it made those smaller companies extremely profitable when he rolled them into his organization. And, his business grew significantly and he did all those 15 acquisitions over an 18-month period. So it was pretty high leverage. And Chad, I'm sure you've got some great examples of this as well.
Oh yeah, from an IT perspective for agility, one example that comes to mind is we have a specialty healthcare group client that from day one, the investors in that had been through the organizations that had the one-man IT shows inside the group. And they realized we're going to grow a lot faster than that. And it doesn't make sense for us to try to design the right IT system from day one on our own, or even just trust one person to do it. We want to be able to leverage the expertise to be able to do it. So I think they started with 10 clinic locations and they've grown 20% year over year, constantly opening new clinic locations, but they've never had to go back and reevaluate their IT decision because and that's one where they've outsourced it to us. But from day one, we designed an infrastructure that would scale up, and they've been able to open new clinics in new markets every time they had the opportunity and the market was right to be able to do it. And they haven't had to scale up their IT team as part of it. IT is a checkbox to them. This is handled. They've got an electronic medical record system that's cloud-based. They've got the networking and network access. All of the sites are tied together. There's unified security, unified identity, and protection across the network that is just scalable. And that's enabled them to take advantage of new business opportunities when they arise without having to worry about, Jim, the IT guy, is not going to be able to handle it if we grow from 15 clinics to 20 clinics. Well, that's okay. You've outsourced that function and they're going to be able to scale up with you. And Jennifer, you might have an additional example on your side, or I've got more IT. I could talk IT all day, but I want to keep the audience awake too.
Well, I kind of like to talk about the threat mitigation. Maybe it's my dark side as an accountant, but so, I've got some great examples too of businesses that were able to mitigate threats through focusing on these core areas. So different industry, but similar business, the first one where they had kind of really proceduralized a lot of their core functions. They handled a lot of their day-to-day transactions in-house. They had a lot of detail. Their ERP system was actually used as a housing for all their products and services and jobs. And so the invoicing process was really part of the closeout of all that work. And so it all was very streamlined. So in 0809, that business was tied to the construction industry. And so their revenue dropped 40% in 2008, 30% in 2009. Where they leveraged expertise, right, was their accounting department was full of folks that did the day-to-day work, but no one who had higher level knowledge of how to manage through something like this. And we had started working with them on a budgeting process about 2 years before that, which was good because we had the knowledge and first year budget, you're way off. Second year budget, you're better. By third year, you got it down. And what the drivers are and what really pushes the levers on that budget. So, their service business heavily tied to headcount. And so when we went through that budget process and those downturns, they wound up doing 4 rounds of layoffs, but it was extremely clear cut on each time, like, okay, businesses dropped this much, orders are down this much, so the forwards is the same. We need to cut this much in payroll to sustain ourselves. And over that 2-year period, they still broke even, which is crazy that they were able to, you can't cut a business off that significantly and cut costs that fast almost ever. And in their case, they did just because we had a tool to manage to that and not just, react to it when things were slow and people were working. But the longer term outcome of that, and why I think right now is a great time to talk about stuff like this, right, is after that, typical net profit in their industry was about 10%. After they went through the 08-09 recession, they did pick up a few customers, they worked through them, but they're consistently at 15 to 20% now. Because what that exercise did was give them discipline when they added headcount and added cost structure as well, to see, like, is it profitable business or not? Should we add the people right now or not? And so it's those kind of tools that can really help you, move your business forward. And you may not have that expertise in house. I mean, they most certainly didn't need to have it at the size they were at that time, nor would they have kept that person on staff at the size they were at that time after the 2 rounds of downturn. So it's kind of a good example of how, their agility was able to help them mitigate a huge threat that actually became real.
And I get to talk about this. Oh, go ahead, Brian. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was going to say that plays a little bit into one of the questions that we have, Jennifer. When a company's working through a budget like that, and you're putting those things in place to know what I'm going to cut, what do I need to cut? If I'm going to invest, where do I invest? If I'm ahead of budget, those type of things. How does a business make the decision when to enact those things? If you have a slight downturn, do you go into doomsday mode? What advice do you give companies to react to economic uncertainty like that?
Yeah, and like that one, it was more, he felt like we should be making more profit than what we were, right? So the 2 years before was when he said, let's start doing a budget, focusing on it, and I laid out, hey, this is a 2 or 3 year thing, because it's a cultural change in your business too, getting people to think about it this way and manage to it. So, some of it's that scenario, some of it's just thinking through best practices, but definitely when you see it happen, right? I still think we could have helped him had he started, had asked us, hey, you got to help me figure out how much to cut. We just wouldn't have reacted as fast as we did. And he probably would have lost some money over that 2 year period, just because you can only do things so quickly, right? And you're not going to terminate someone and not, their payroll doesn't stop that day. They get paid in arrears, and they usually have unpaid benefits and things like that. So, and that's kind of a dark example, but it's kind of making sure that and the reason why that budget worked right was they knew the key drivers of their business and what those key metrics were too.
Very good. Chad, go ahead.
Sure. I'll do a couple of IT examples, because IT is all about risk mitigation, risk management along these things. And IT really starts with, do you know that your data is protected? Can you restore it if you needed it? Is it secured? Is the access controlled? But that's not fun to talk about. I'll talk about a couple of IT security examples. One IT security example that comes to mind that one of our clients had, when they were prepared to react to this because of the choices that they'd made on what do they invest in internally and what do they choose to outsource and get that expertise on. This one looked normal from all the indicators. The accounting team at this particular client received an email from one of their outside vendors that they routinely receive a bill from. And it was properly formatted. It was written in the language that the vendor normally uses. It was individually addressed. It had the normal invoice structure. Everything about it looked normal, except the vendor was providing a routing number update. It even looked like it came from the right email address. So the person that received the bill in the AP group followed proper procedure and forwarded it to a supervisor and said, hey, they're asking for a routing change. Is that okay? And neither the individual nor the supervisor actually followed the full procedure, which was to pick up the phone and call the vendor and verify the routing number is different. But the bad actor in this case that had sent this malicious message had followed along for 2 months, writing along in this person's email, understood the patterns, was able to correspond as the other person, inject themselves into the middle of the correspondence, and both the supervisor and the employee agreed, yeah, that's normal. Go ahead and do it. Let's do a routing number change, and sent over $100,000 to the threat actor's bank. Now, that's not the end of the story on it. The threat actor in that case got $0 because our client had the right security, the cybersecurity insurance, the incident response team, the IT team. And as soon as they realized, whoa, something's wrong here, which unfortunately happened after they had initiated the wire transfer, they were able to pick up the phone, priority one, let's get all of the heads immediately on this. They don't have to search for them. They have them standing by. They've got these things available because of the choices that they made along the way. We were able to work with the incident response team, the cybersecurity insurer, the Secret Service was even involved. from an IT perspective, we were able to piece together the exact timeline of events over the course of 2 months where that original accounting user had given out their username, password, and multi-factor authentication to the threat actor, and we were able to trace through exactly what the threat actor had. Now, the Secret Service was able to contact the bank and get the wire transfer sent back. So they actually worked that out with the bank. So there weren't actually direct financial losses on this. But this client's a healthcare organization. So they now are aware that there was a unauthorized person reading their correspondence in a potential HIPAA violation with private health information. And so the open question is now, do we have a reportable incident at that point? And the IT team, using the technology and tools that were already put in place, that infrastructure, were able to itemize all of the things that the threat actor did, including every email that they read while they were in the environment, to determine, was it PHI or was it not? Unfortunately, this one was fairly low profile. The threat actor on it was actually only looking for financial transactions. They were not at all interested in patient information. So there wasn't a significant disclosure of that information, but it still served as a great reminder of, hey, we've got to have all these pieces in place and standing by so that we can mitigate those threats very quickly when they do arise. And ideally, we want to prevent them. We have I recognize I'm going to talk about a ton of examples, and I'm probably going to burn us out on time because I'm just looking at the clock on this. But I would be happy to do Q&A against or with additional IT security things. Let me step one thing through here. So let me turn this back to you, the audience, to ask, where's your business today? Are you tangled or are you agile? If we take the opposite of agile, and we'll call it tangled, most of us probably aren't all one or the other. We all have pieces of what we do that are working really well and pieces of what we do that we're just trying to get unstuck from. And whether you're looking at it for your organization overall or within a specific department or even a specific function or a deliverable, it can be helpful to summarize the journey to your constituents and your stakeholders, your leadership team, the people that are out there making these things happen, the people that will be making the investment along with you, either in cost or opportunity or time, and that have to agree that the destination's worth it. When you take your core value proposition and you break it down to the contributing components, you can assess where you are and decide where you want to be. And as part of that, you'll identify things that are taking cost and effort, but that aren't contributing to that core value proposition and aren't giving you an appropriate return. Apply a purposeful cost benefit strategy to those. Build, buy and customize, buy standard, and really put your attention to growth. And with that, I'll hand it back over to Brian in case we've got some Q&A that are out there.
Yeah, we've got a couple here and about 8 minutes to work through. So we've talked a little bit about automating functions of this. It's something that's relatively new to a lot of folks. How do you identify what you can automate, what you shouldn't automate, how to get started, what it's going to cost, what that maintenance is going to be, what should that thought process look like? And Chad, I'll kick it to you, and then Jennifer, chime in for sure.
So without knowing exactly the function that we're talking about, I would start by quantifying how much revenue or how much cost is associated with those functions today. Figure out what your initial ballpark operating budget is. Figure out what your potential opportunity is. If you can quantify something and say, we're spending X thousands of dollars on this per month, per week, per quarter, per year, whatever. And you could then start with and say, okay, our real objective here is we want to reduce that by 30%. We want to reduce that by 40%. And you just have to pick a number to start with and say, that's going to be our target. That's really what we're entering. You now have a number about what you're willing to invest on an annual or quarterly or whatever basis. It's got to be a fraction of that. It's got to be less than that number, or it's not even worth having the conversation. As you start going through and thinking through what would it actually take to automate that function, if you're considering if the dollar amount is large enough, if the potential savings is large enough, it's part of your core value proposition, now you've got to factor in, do I need to hire somebody as an employee and maintain them in order to be able to write this type of automation? If I'm going to train someone to do that automation, am I willing to take a month of their attention in the next year and send them through $20,000 worth of courses or $5,000 worth of courses? Are they the right people to learn that technique, do they have that mindset? Are they going to approach it? So the next step on this, before you start going down that path of uncertainty, is probably then to do some consultation with experts and development groups and get their feedback. They're going to come to the table and look at what you're proposing for automation, and they're going to ask some very precise questions about how you envision doing it. And they might charge you for that consulting time, but that's fine. You're getting value, you're getting expertise back on it. And they'd be able to come back with, from their view, here's what the plan looks like, here's what an implementation looks like, and here's what they'd propose as far as options to do it. Well, now you've got a solid number based in some expertise that you can compare versus what your internal efforts would be, and you kind of know what the output's going to look like.
Good deal. Jennifer, anything to add there?
No, I mean, I think Chad was right on, because really I see a lot of clients that try to automate things just because it sounds cool or it's a good idea, or it, and that's not the reason to do it, right? If it's something that takes someone 15 minutes once a week, it might not be worth automating, right? It might be just push the task to the lowest level possible and move on with your life. So I liked starting with the end in mind of what am I trying to accomplish and what am I trying to save, not just, oh, that'd be cool. I'm sure that saves us time.
One other question. A company that is preparing for a pending sale, so they know they're going to take their business to market in the near future, is that the time to explore outsourcing, or is that one of those things where let's wait, let's continue to operate the way we've always operated until we get through that process? What should they be thinking about in that regard?
So you want me to take that one, Chad, first, or?
Knock yourself out.
Yeah, I mean, I think in general, right, if it's imminent, right, someone approached me and I want to talk to them right now, I'd probably say sit tight, because consistency is probably better than inconsistency. If it's something that's a year out or more, it's a great opportunity, because then you're saving dollars to the bottom line, right? That if you're creating real savings, typically if you're looking to sell, you might get anywhere from 4 to 7 or more, depends on your industry, right? Times your earnings. So if you're saving real money in that outsourcing function and you can demonstrate it to a buyer, well, then you're basically adding that to the bottom line. And let's say it's a 7 times multiple sale, you're going to get 7 times that number in a transaction. So it's really thinking about it from disruption, consistency of data, consistency of procedures, but also thinking of it in what am I really saving here and how does that benefit me?
I think the timeline really is the important part of that equation. If it was a transaction that is on the table and is going to be coming up in the short term, less than 6 months, less than a year from now, don't invest a whole bunch of money into it, because especially, and I'm going to talk from an IT perspective, your return on IT investments are typically going to be anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 years. So you aren't going to realize the value of that. The buyer is the one that's potentially going to realize the value of it, but you've already incurred the cost. So the buyer wins twice over on that. That said, we do work with a number of organizations that strategically are trying to position themselves to long-term asset growth with the intent to be acquired. And that's part of their IT strategy and what they do. And in outsourcing a lot of those back office functions, they're actually reinforcing the value of their organization, because it would show any potential buyer there's continuity here. We don't have to step in. It's not going to break in the first 12 months after the purchase, because there's already somebody that's an expert that's taking care of that. The buyer can then focus on purchasing your core value proposition. And that's really where you want to be spending your effort anyways, all along the way.
Very good. Well, thank you both. This is very good content. I'm sure sparked a lot of thoughts and concerns maybe along the way, but also give some parameters about how folks can think about this. So again, thank you all for joining today's webcast. At the end of this, like I said, you're going to get a quick survey. Please give us that feedback. And those of you that are eligible for CPE, you can download your certificate, and then you'll also get an email within the next 24 hours to do that. So appreciate it. Thank you all very, very much. And we look forward to joining you on the next one.